Okay, good evening again. Good evening, everyone. Can you listen to me?
Yes, teacher.
All right, okay. So we're going to start. Okay. Some of you, I can hear you so well. Yeah. All right.
Good evening, Mr. Gatillon. I can
Good
hear
evening.
you.
All right. Okay, good evening, Vanessa. All right. Okay, so we're going to start today with a new module. Yeah, this is a new module because last session we finished with syntax, no, with related the module related to syntax, those related to linguistics. Now we are going to talk about the different skills that we have in a language. No, we have, as you know, we have four major skills. No, that is reading, listening, writing, and speaking. All right. So you know all about these skills. So in this module, we are going to talk about this skill deeply, in a deeply way. So we are going to recognize some aspects related to this skill. Then we're going to analyze some techniques and strategies in order to teach this skill. No, but you know, when we talk about teaching skills, it's impossible to divide it when we teach the skills, no? But here we're going to try to divide this into one by one because we want to get some knowledge about the aspect, the different sub skills, or what is it involved when we read something, or we're going to teach reading to our students. So this is the purpose of this module, no? And we are going to start talking about this skill, reading. Sometimes this skill is considered a passive one, no? When we talked about, oh, reading, listening, yeah, you don't have to do something important, no? But this skill is so important when we learn a language, and we're going to analyze why, no? What's the reason? So let's start. The first question, and you want to tell me, I want you to tell me this. Tell me about what you know, about your background knowledge. What is reading for you? Can you tell me? Any volunteer to tell me? What is reading for you? Any volunteer? Okay, Flor. Flor, are you there? What happened with Flor? What is reading? Tell me your ideas. Tell me your ideas about reading. What is reading? Oh, Flor, I can see that your microphone is on and then it's off. What's going on? There are two floors. Floor Chambi, two floors Chambis. All right. No, Floor, no idea? Anybody else? Anybody else? Tell me,
Yes,
tell me.
teacher.
Yeah, tell me.
When we read, we recognize the words and we understand the words.
All right. Yes, that's good, Abraham. When we read, we're going to recognize the words, understand what they mean, right? What's the purpose of the message? Excellent, Abraham. Any other person? Tell me, don't be afraid. What is reading for you? Yeah, Lucy.
Reading now is a competence of the language and includes many activities. For example, you need to use correctly the intonation. You need to understand all the information, and there are many aspects that include reading. But I think it's a competence.
All right. Yes, you're right.
To use, no?
Exactly. Yes, you're right, Lucy. It's a competence proposed by the minister, no? So, but remember that it's also a skill, no? When we talked about language, we manage different skills, no? Such as reading, writing, and listening, and speaking. And you mentioned something important, the different kind of readings, no? Reading aloud, here it focus on the intonation, the pronunciation, or reading by yourself, no? To understand words or messages or meanings. That's good, Lucy. Anybody else? One more, or two more? Tell me about reading. Ruth wrote something in the chat. Ruth says, reading is understanding. All right. Understanding. Yes. That's why it's very common, the expression reading comprehension, no? Laura? Laura? Do you want to say something?
No.
Oh, no. All right. All right. Okay. Don't forget to turn off your microphone, please. Yeah? Okay. But Laura, by the way, can you tell me what is reading for you, Laura?
Reading is something that I understand.
Yeah.
I think.
All right. Okay. That's it, Laura. Yeah. Generally, when we talk about reading, or when you hear this word reading, did you reading? When you read some letters and try to understand what they mean, what is the message? All right. Yeah, this is in general terms. So today we're going to talk about this and the different aspects, as Lucy said, related to reading. What is involved when we talked about reading? And it's very important to know as a teacher, because you can recognize, you can realize the ways, the strategies or techniques that you could apply to teach this skill or this competence, as Lucy says. Okay, so let's start. Reading, notice, is a process, conscious and unconscious thinking process. You're going to think consciously and unconsciously. So it's a process. Remember, it's a thinking process, because you are going to think about what you read, and not only what you read. There are some parts that you are going to analyze before reading and after reading. Then we're going to do that. The reader, so the person who reads, the reader applies many strategies to reconstruct the meaning that the author is assumed to have intended. So the person who wants to read or is reading a text uses many strategies, many techniques to do what? To reconstruct, notice here, the meaning, what the author wants to say, or intended to say. So here you have some aspects of reading. Notice, first, there is a thinking process, sometimes conscious, sometimes unconsciously. And the reader is going to use some strategies, some techniques in order to recover, to reconstruct the meaning of the text which is read. Now, what is involved in reading? What are we going to do when we read something? There are some aspects, some points to consider. Let's see what they are. First, the reader does this by comparing information in the text to his or her background knowledge and prior experience. This is what I told you before, a few minutes ago, a few seconds ago. Because when we talked about reading, just the process of reading, when you read the text, a paper, a book, but it's not only that. Notice here, it's not only that. Here says, when you read something, what are you going to do? You are going to compare. Compare information that you can find in the text with the information that you have on your own, your background knowledge, or your prior experiences, your values, your beliefs. So you're going to make a contrast. Notice, you're going to make a contrast. The information that you can find in the text with your own information. Notice, this is one aspect when we read something. Compare information. A reader approaches a text with a huge store of prior knowledge and experience, including preconceptions about the uses of a spoken and written language. Notice, when we talked about the background knowledge and prior experience, it's not just the experiences you had in your life or some information that you have about life or facts or real facts. No, it's not just that. It also includes some conceptions or preconceptions about the language in a spoken or in a written way. So you have some knowledge about the language, your own language with the language that you're going to use to read the test. So you're going to make a contrast to. Notice these two aspects when you read something, all right? You compare information related to your own knowledge, your background knowledge, or your prior experience with information that you can find in the test. And the second one is related to the language itself. The language that you speak as a native speaker and the language that you're going to find in the test that you're going to read. Notice here this kind of information that you're going to make a contrast or compare. Now, this information, this prior knowledge or experience or values are organized in categories or schemata. Notice, this is the name, the technical name from this prior knowledge or experience and values. We call this knowledge the schemata. Remember, all of a person's prior knowledge, experience, and values are organized in categories called the schemata. Each category or schema is connected to many other schemata in a complex mental network. So you're going to connect all your experiences, all your prior knowledge related to life, to real facts, or related to the language, and they are going to form a complex mental network. So the reader matches that information with background knowledge and is able to construct a version of the test meaning. That's why some people say when you read something, you can understand it in a different way to another person who read the same test, because you have different points of view, different schemata, different experiences, different values. So the understanding or the comprehension of this test could be different. All right? So notice here the theory of this schemata or schema. So all this information, all this prior knowledge, all these experiences are called schemata, categories. No? They are divided into categories, and they create a complex mental network in order to construct your version of the test meaning. So notice what we are going to do when we read something. It's not just reading the letters and try to understand or try to realize what is the meaning of these words. No, when you join sounds, you join letters, you make words, and when you make words, you make sentences. When you make sentences, you join sentences, you make paragraphs, and you read this. But it's not only that. Notice what is involved in the reading process. Now, remember that this is a thinking process. Now, let's analyze some types of schemata. There are three types of schemata that have an impact on reading comprehension. Three. The first one is the formal schemata. What is the formal schemata? Is the prior knowledge of rhetorical structures and conventions. For example, different types of expository organizational patterns, such as cause and effect, comparison and contrast, problem and solution, or maybe you can give a chronological order, etc. So these are called rhetorical structures and conventions that you use in a language. You know, when we speak or when we write, we're going to use these rhetorical devices, no? You make assimilation or alliteration, or you use metaphors, no? Or you use these contexts such as cause and effect, comparison and contrast, problem and solution, chronological order. So you have these different structures, different rhetorical structures and conventions that you use in a language, specifically when you write or speak. So you are going to use this to compare to the text you are going to read. Notice this is called the formal schemata. Yeah? The knowledge of rhetorical structures and conventions. The second one is the content schemata. The content is related to the subject of the text, the background knowledge of the subject of the text, which is often culture bound. No? This is one of the reasons that sometimes we cannot understand what we read because we don't know anything about the subject of the text. It's new for us. So it's difficult, no? It's difficult to understand it. For example, if I gave you right now a book related to medicine, could you understand it well? No, right? I don't think so. Maybe you are doctors or nurses, maybe you can understand it better because there are some terminology that you use when you talk about medicine, but we are not familiar about this subject. But sometimes when we have some knowledge about the subject, we are going to compare it. No, we are going to compare. For example, if I gave you right now a book or a test related to grammar, English grammar, or phonetics or phonology, you can compare it, right? Oh yeah, yes, I know. Maybe with the knowledge that you have related to your own language, related to phonetics or phonology. So this is the content schemata, all right? And that's why here says that it's often culture bound, because the subject or topic of a test is related to the culture of a country, right? And the third one, yes, Lucy, yes, you're right. No, you can understand easily because you can find different words. The vocabulary, yes, the vocabulary is specific, no, related to that field, no, related to the subject. So it's gonna be not so easy, no, it's gonna be so easy to understand it. No? So our background in that case is not so good, all right? Because we can find in our brain, in our complex mental schemata, and we cannot find it, no? We cannot find it, these terms of this terminology or some aspect related to medicine, we cannot find it. So it could be complicated, no? That's it, Lucy, very good. Now remember that you can answer using the chat or using your microphones, all right? And the third one is the linguistic schemata. Decoding knowledge used to recognize words, this is what you told me, to recognize words and determine their syntax in a sentence, that is prior knowledge of a particular vocabulary and grammar rules. Notice here the rules, grammar rules, the syntax. This is what we were talking about the last section, no? to recognize words and determine the syntax in a sentence. So we have some structures, fixed structures, syntactical structures in our mind. And sometimes it's complicated to understand it. No? For example, in our language, we don't have verbs such as the phrasal verbs that you can separate it. No? Remember that in phrasal verbs, there are some phrasal verbs that you can separate it. And then when we read these kind of words, but up is after the noun. Why? I can understand it because we're not accustomed to have these kind of structures, syntactical structures. So in the linguistic schemata, we have this knowledge, no? Decoding. Remember, decodify. You are going to decodify this knowledge that we use to recognize words and determine the syntax in a sentence. No? Some particular vocabulary too, and grammar rules. So notice the different types of schemata. All right? Don't forget about this term. No se olviden de este término. Schemata. Es todo el conocimiento previo que uno tiene, ya sea de sus experiencias, valores, creencias, pero no solamente eso, sino también el conocimiento que tengo del idioma, mi idioma y del idioma que estoy aprendiendo o hablando o leyendo en este caso. Vamos a comparar. Miren, no solamente leer es entender las palabritas que estamos, o saber el significado de las palabritas, sino que vamos a utilizar un proceso más amplio, donde voy a comparar este conocimiento previo, pues dice background knowledge o prior knowledge, con la información que se me presenta en el texto que voy a leer. All right? Don't forget about it. Okay. Now, when a person reads, two aspects of this human information processing system continuously interact. Do you have any idea which are these two aspects? Here says that we have two aspects when we read, and they interact each other. Nobody? You can write it in the chat, or you can use your microphone. No, nobody. There are two aspects that when we read, these two aspects are going to interact continuously. No, nobody. Okay, don't worry, don't be afraid. So let's see. When the reader focuses primarily on what he or she already knows, this is called a concept-driven or top-down mode. Notice here, the reader focuses primarily on what he or she already knows. And we call this a concept-driven or top-down mode. Focus on the prior knowledge or the background knowledge. Notice here, this is one of the aspects that we were talking about. You compare the information that you have with the information that you can find in the text. And the first aspect is this, that you're going to focus on what you know, what you already know, and we call this the concept-driven or top-down mode. This is one, remember, yeah? The other aspect, as here says, on the other hand, when the reader relies primarily on textual features and information to comprehend, this is called a data-driven or bottom-up model. So notice here, I'm going back. We have two. The first aspect is related to what you know, what you already know, your background knowledge. And the second aspect is related to what you want to understand, what you want to comprehend, the textual, notice here, the textual features and information to comprehend. This is what you told me, no? When you say, oh, teacher, yeah, reading is to understand the words, to understand sentences, paragraphs, and to get a meaning, no, a message of the test. So it means that you're focusing more on the bottom-up model. That you focus more on the textual features of the test and information to comprehend. But you are not focusing on what you know. Here, these two aspects. Notice these two aspects when we read something. We have this one based on what you know, or we have the second one based on the test itself. If you notice, here you have another difference. The most important here is the person, the reader. Notice here, this aspect is most important, the reader, the person who reads, because you are focusing on what you know, what the reader knows, already knows. But here, it's not important the reader. The most important is the test. If you comprehend the test, the textual features, the information given to comprehend. So don't forget about the names. The first one is top-down, because we're going to use these words a lot in this session. Top-down and bottom-up. Remember, top-down, bottom-up. In other words, the reader is constantly noticing parts of the test and comparing that sample with what he or she already knows. This is what we do when we read something. We are going to constantly notice parts of the test, analyze the test. This is the meaning of this word. Yeah, it's like an adjective. No, you analyze the test. Yeah, the author wants to say that. But you compare it with what you already know, and you get a message. You get a comprehension, a total comprehension of the text. And these two aspects interact continuously when we read something. All right? Notice here. Notice this diagram. Here we have these two aspects. At the top part, the reader, notice, the reader processes tests in a line of mental schemata. What is that? Background knowledge, knowledge about the language and literacy. Then we're going to talk about literacy. Cultural values and beliefs. So this is the, how do you call this? Can you remember?
Schemata.
Top-down.
Yeah. All right. But which aspect of reading is this?
Top-down.
The top?
Top-down.
Oh, right. The reader is the most important here. What he or she already knows related to her or his own experiences, or related to the language and literacy, or related to the values and beliefs that he or she has. And the second, the button, notice that's why here says top, button. Button is here the most important thing is the test. It provides new data to be processed. So the shape and sounds of the letters, the meaning of words and phrases, and some grammatical information. How do you call this aspect?
Bottom-up.
The button. Yeah, that's right. So when this interact, that's why here you have this arrow up and down, no? It means that you are constantly interacting these two aspects of reading. You are constantly interacting. That's why the arrows, no? Up, down, up, down, up, down. So it means you use the top, then you use the bottom. You use the top, you use the bottom. And you produce comprehension. The reader matches the data and a schema, and this is called comprehension. Notice these two aspects of reading, in not just to analyze the shape of and sounds of the letters, to to know the meaning of words and phrases, or to get some idea of grammatical information. And not just that. It involves more. It involves your knowledge, your prior knowledge, your background knowledge, your values, your beliefs. And this is reading. All right? This is reading. Readers' first language and mental schemata, however, determine what they notice in a text and how they apply the mental schemata to that information. And second language readers' mental schemata are based on their first language and cultural background. Notice here what I told you. You're going to use your knowledge related to your first language and your own cultural background, and you're going to connect. All right? You're going to connect with the language that you are reading. All right? This means that what second language reader notice in the text and how they interpret it will vary. Notice, it will vary due to differing expectations about language structure and cultural attitudes toward literacy. This is what I told you before too. A reader, you give to your students a test. Some of your students have a better literacy. They have more vocabulary. They have more experiences in life. But some students not. They don't have a good vocabulary. I'm talking about the first language. I'm not talking about the second language. No, because there are some students who have a good literacy. Literacy, remember, is called when you write, speak well. No, this is called literacy. Then we're going to talk about more about literacy. Yeah, but in general terms, literacy is when you write or speak well. Some of your students, native language, I'm talking about the native language. Some of your students have a good literacy, some of them not. So that way they are going to understand a test in a second language will be different. They are not going to understand it in the same way because they have different background information related to his or her life or related to the language. They have different expectations. That's why he says different expectations about the language structure and cultural attitudes toward literacy. So they are going to have different interpretations. All right? They're going to have different interpretations. Notice here how important is literacy in the first language, in the native language, in the mother tongue, when you read something in a second language. All right? It's so important. Notice this diagram. When we read a text, we're going to use some strategies, some cognitive processing strategies, and some language processing strategies. Remember that reading is a process. So we are going to use some strategies related to cognition and related to the knowledge of the language. Yeah, scanning. Oh, Cindy wrote something in the chat. Scanning, yeah, it's some strategy in order to read, to get some ideas easily, all right? In a quick reading or fast reading, we use scanning and skimming, But notice here that we're going to use other strategies. In the cognitive processing strategies, we're going to use inferencing, predicting, problem solving, constructing meaning. And in the language processing strategies, we're going to use chunking into phrases, accessing word meaning, word identification, and letter recognition. In the cognitive, notice here, we have this process: infer, predict, solve problems, and construct meaning. In the language processing strategies, chunk, remember, chunk is a group of words. You're going to use it to make phrases. This is a chunk. Chunking into phrases, accessing word meaning, word identification, you identify the word, and later recognition. So we're going to use these too. And also we're going to use our knowledge, the knowledge base, the word knowledge and the language knowledge. Notice we have these two kind of knowledge. The word knowledge, so the knowledge that you have related to people, places, events, activities, and the language knowledge related to sentences, phrases, words, letters, sounds. Notice all the process that is involved in reading, in not just understand as the words or the sentences. Notice here, we have other aspects when we read something. Sorry, my throat today is not so good. All right, so it's not it's not a simple process. If you notice, it's a complex process. It involves many things, not just decodify the letters and that's it. No. So we are going to infer, we are going to predict, we are going to solve problems, we are going to construct meaning related to cognition, related to the language. We're going to chunk words, recognize the group of words that go together to make phrases, to recognize the meaning of words, identify the words, the spelling related to the letter recognition. And also we're going to use the knowledge that we have related to the word and related to the language. So we are going to connect all of this. Notice, we're going to connect all of this when we read something. That's what I told you at the beginning of the class. No? Sometimes when we talked about, okay, teacher, yeah, reading, listening, they are passive because we consider there is no interaction. But if you can notice, there is an interaction. It's not passive. It's not a passive skill because you are going to process information and you're going to compare, to make a contrast, to use the knowledge of your the world and the knowledge of the language, the first and the second language. Notice, not just your language or not just the language that you're learning. You're going to compare your own language with the language that you want to learn. So notice all the process, all the aspects that it's involved when we read something. All right. Now, in previous slides, we talked about this word. What is literacy? It's important here, all right? Literacy. What is that? Literacy, notice here, is a set or group. No, remember, set is similar to say group. It's a set of attitudes and beliefs about the ways of using a spoken and written language that are acquired in the course of a person's socialization into a specific cultural context. So notice here, attitudes, beliefs, about what? About how you use, the ways you use the spoken and written language. Notice, spoken and written language. In last years and past years, we have a different definition of literacy. For example, some people think that literacy was related just to write. But nowadays, it's not just related to writing. Now it's related to speaking too. All right? So it involves these skills, speaking and writing. So this is called literacy. But remember,
Also reading, teacher, could be literacy, the ability of speaking,
when you
writing,
read,
and reading.
when you read aloud.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is related. But most important here is the speaking and writing. Yeah.
Writing. Okay.
Yes, this is called literacy. But in the past, as I told you before, in the past, literacy was just related to writing. For example, in our country, I remember, let me see, when I was 12, 13 years old, there was a program, I don't know, you can remember, alfabetización. No sé si se acuerdan que había en nuestro país antes un programa, ¿no? Alfabetización, que es literacy. Literacy es similar to say in Spanish, alfabetización. Y me acuerdo que en esos tiempos, alfabetización solamente era las personas que no sabían escribir, ¿no? Pero ahora ya no se considera solamente la escritura, sino también el hablar. Cuando yo hablo de una persona alfabeta, quiere decir que es una persona que utiliza muy bien los recursos para poder escribir y hablar. This is literacy. In Spanish, alfabetización. Don't forget it. So, remember, when you read something, it's very important to have a good literacy. Remember that we talked about that we are going to use some rhetorical structures. When do we use these rhetorical structures? When we speak and when we write. But if we don't know, or we don't have these two aspects in a good way, in a good manner, it's going to be not so easy to understand what we read. That's why we have some problems, no? Because we don't have this. We don't manage these rhetorical structures well. And that's why it's not so easy to understand when we read a test. Teachers, notice here the important factor of teachers. Teachers cannot assume that students who are good readers in their native language can simply apply successfully the same skills to reading in English. So as I told you before, so it means, teacher, we are we have a good literacy in our first language, so it means that we're gonna be good in the second language. Not always. He says, if you are a good reader in your native language, it doesn't mean that you're gonna be successful in the second language. Teaching reading in a standard English to second or foreign language learners means helping them. So this is our function. Notice here, this is very important to remember as a teacher. What is our function? We need to help our students acquire ways, different ways of thinking about the test that they are going to read, that are practiced by native speakers of English. So this is our function as a teacher of English. We must give our students different strategies. They need to acquire different strategies, different ways of thinking about the test. This is our role as a teacher. All right? To give them tools. We must give them tools how to understand a test. It's not just, yeah, read this, answer this, that's it. No, this is sometimes because of the time we do this, no? Yeah, you're gonna read this test, yeah, answer the question for this test, that's it. Notice, here you are using just button up, because you're focused more, the student must read and understand each letter, each word, each sentence, and get some information, and that's it. There are many different ways, many different strategies that we could give our students to understand a test. So this is important to remember, all right? As a teacher, you are going to help your students acquire different ways of thinking about the test. Don't forget about it. In fact, learning to read and comprehend a second language requires learning a secondary literacy. Alternative cultural interpretations, cultural beliefs about the language and discourse, and culture-specific formal and content schemata. So they're going to have a second literacy, a secondary literacy, in order to read and comprehend a second language. Because they need to use these interpretations, cultural interpretations, beliefs about the language and discourse. So we are going to use that. We are going to use the formal and content schemata. Notice that we have three types of schemata: formal, content, and what is the third one? Can you remember? Formal schemata. What is the formal schemata? Remember that we talked about three kind of schemata: formal, content, and what is the third one? Can you remember? Can you remember?
Linguistic schemata.
Excellent. That's it, jury. The linguistic schemata. But notice here that we are focusing in two: the formal and content schemata. Formal schemata is related to, what is it related to? The formal schemata? Here it is. Here it is. What is the formal schemata? Tell me. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. What is the formal schemata? No, nobody. You forgot.
No.
Tell me, Yuri. Tell me.
Background knowledge.
Knowledge.
Yes, the background knowledge, the beliefs, the cultural interpretations. Remember,
The prior knowledge.
the prior knowledge. Yes. This is the formal schemata. And the content schemata? What is it about?
Background knowledge.
Yeah, the background knowledge is the formal. And the content? The knowledge that we have about the knowledge that we have about the. I give you an example. If we read a medicine book, could you understand it easily? Maybe you are a master of English. You got a C1 exam or C2 exam, advanced level of English, and you are presented to read, or you are shown to read a medicine book. Could you understand it easily?
I don't think so.
Yeah, why?
Yeah, because I don't have a knowledge about medicine.
Excellent. So this is the content, because you don't have a knowledge about the subject of the reading.
Yeah.
Remember,
Okay.
content schemata is the knowledge that you have about the subject. The formal schemata is the background knowledge, your prior knowledge, cultural values or beliefs that you have related to your life. No? The world. Remember that we have two knowledge, no? The world knowledge and the language knowledge. The world knowledge is the formal schemata. Experiences, beliefs, values, some knowledge that you have about people, costumes, activities. Notice this is the formal schemata. And the content is the knowledge that you have related to the subject. And the linguistic is that language knowledge. The linguistic schemata, in simple terms, is the language knowledge, the knowledge that you have about the language, your first language and the second language. That's why here says that you need to have a second literacy or secondary literacy, because you must know, or you must have a knowledge about the second language too. How to use these rhetorical devices when you speak or write in the second language, not just in the first language. Notice that's why here says secondary literacy. All right. Okay, let's continue here. Oh, Natalie, do you want to say something? I think your microphone is on. Oh, no. All right. Okay. Natalie Cruzado. All right. Yeah. Let's continue with...
My friend.
Yes, I can remember. Yeah, I can remember Natalie. Hello, Natalie. Theories of reading. Notice here that we're going to have some theories of reading related. Yeah, these theories of reading, the process of reading, is related to the two aspects of reading that we talked about before. The first one is the traditional view. The traditional view is related or focus on the printed form of a text. So the most important here is the text, not the person who read the text. All right? This is the traditional view. Focus on the printed form of a text. Cognitive view, that enhance the role of background knowledge in addition to what appear on the printed page. Here, the background knowledge, in addition to you have in the printed page. No? Notice, the first one, the most important is the text. In the cognitive, the most important is the background knowledge. And the third one is the metacognitive view. You know, I know that you know this term, no? What is metacognition? Can you give me a definition of metacognition? What is that? Metacognition. No, nobody? Metacognition, metacognitive.
In this case, we use the processor menta. For example, the inference, when you make conclusions. I don't know.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but I'm talking about in general. In a general aspect, what is metacognition? For example, nowadays, when you prepare a lesson plan, you're asked to specify some metacognitive activities.
Yeah, we analyze the process of our. We analyze the process of learning, of how to acquire the information. It's kind of an awareness of our own thinking process, something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, when we talk about metacognition, is that you analyze how you learn something, no?
Yeah.
You analyze the process of learning, how you do it. if you like it or not. What did you do
Yeah.
to learn?
What did you do to get information?
Exactly. Yes, that's it. Ruth wrote something in the chat. Reflection of what has been learned. Yes, it's a kind of reflection, right? It's a kind of reflection, something that we have learned and analyzed, how we did it, what we learned. No, this is a metacognition. All right, metacognition. So a metacognitive view is related to that, based on the control and manipulation that a reader can have on the act of comprehending a text. So they are going to, the reader is going to control or manipulate the different aspects related to or involving comprehending a text. He's going to analyze, notice, oh yeah, in order to understand the test, I did this first. Then I do this. Oh, and I like this part because it's interesting. Oh, I didn't like that part because it was boring. So notice, the reading is controlling. No, next time I'm going to use this strategy. No, that strategy. Or this technique. No, that technique. So notice, here, the reader is controlling, is manipulating, because he's analyzing. How is he understanding the process, not this process of reading, the act of comprehending a text? So we have here these three theories of reading. Now we are going to analyze it more. Yeah. Let's start talking about the traditional view. Yeah. Oh, what's going on? Just give me a second. Yeah. Okay. The traditional view. According to Dole et al., this famous linguist, in the traditional view of reading, novice readers acquire a set of hierarchically ordered sub-skills that sequentially build toward comprehension ability. So notice there are hierarchically ordered sub-skills. You have to do this first, then second, then third. So there is a process with some hierarchical activities that you need to do first, second, third, and so on, in order to build toward comprehension ability. Readers, according to this point of view, to this theory, readers are passive recipients of information in the text. Notice, passive recipients of information in the text. Meaning resides in the text, and the reader has to reproduce meaning. Just it. As I told you before, you give a test to your students, they need to understand it and get the meaning of some messages from this test, and that's it. So they are passive. In that way, they are passive readers. Notice, passive recipients of information in the test. The most important is that they can reproduce. Here it says, they can reproduce. Yeah, read this and tell me what's the meaning. Yeah, that's it. They reproduce that meaning. According to Nenen, another linguist, reading in this view is basically a matter of decoding a series of written symbols. Notice, decoding a series of written symbols into their oral equivalents in the quest for making sense of the text. So you decodify these written symbols and you can make a sense of the text. That's it. Decodification. Reading on this theory is related to decodification, no more, in order to get a sense of meaning of the text. So he referred to this process as the bottom-up view of reading. So the bottom-up model acknowledges that readers proceed from the written text to the meaning. Readers are passive recipients of meaning. Meaning resides in text. Meaning is driven by the text. Reading proceeds from part to whole. Oh, yeah. Here, we're going to focus more on this. So notice what a reading is in this theory, this traditional view of reading. So it's just a reproduction, no? A reproduction of the text. Readers are passive. The most important here is the text. And you read from parts to a whole, no? From something specific to a bigger part, no? To the whole meaning of the text. First, you need to understand the specific points, and then you're going to get to the general message of the text, the general meaning of the text. All right? From the bottom-up perspective, it is believed that a step-by-step procedure. So notice here how we are going to do this. First, you need to identify letters. Identification of letters. Then you have to recognize spelling patterns and words. Then you're going to process the meaning of sentences, paragraphs, and text. Oh, sorry. Notice this process of reading is focused more on the text. The textual, no? The textual information that we have in the text. First, you need to identify the letters. Then you have to recognize the spelling patterns and words. And finally, you process the meaning of sentences, paragraphs, and text. So notice here, what is the point of view related to this theory and the way that you are going to read a text. Summarizing, the bottom-up model emphasizes a single direction, part-to-whole processing of a text. Bottom up from the reading test, and then you get the meaning of the test. First, you need to identify letters, recognize the spelling patterns and structures, and finally, you get to the meaning of sentences, phrases, and the test. From a part to a whole, all right? This is the bottom up. Remember, bottom up. Yeah, remember this name because then when we talk about strategies and techniques, we're going to talk about bottom up activities and top down activities. Now, let's pass to the other one, the cognitive view. The top-down model, remember the cognitive is related to the top-down model, is in direct opposition to the bottom-up model. According to Nennen, 1991, and Tobin and Vicina the same year, the psycholinguistic model of reading, this is another way, another term related to this view, to this theory. Yeah? Remember, these are theories. Yeah? The psycholinguistic model of reading and the top-down model are in exact concordance. Reading, according to this view, is a psycholinguistic guessing game, a process in which readers sample the text, make hypotheses, confirm or reject them, make new hypotheses, and so forth. Notice what is the big difference with the previous theory. In the previous one, The most important is the test to recognize letters, words, sentences, and the meaning of these words, phrases, and sentences, and so on. But here, no. Here is like a guessing game. You need to predict. You need to make hypotheses. Confirm this hypothesis or reject this hypothesis and create new ones. So notice the difference between these two points of view of theories. The reader, rather than the test, is at the heart of a reading process. The focus of reading is changed too. In the previous one, the focus was the test. Now, the focus is the reader. Schemata as building blocks of cognition, which are used in the process of interpreting sensory data, in retrieving information from memory, in organizing goals and sub-goals, in allocating resources, and in guiding the flow of the processing system. So this is the importance of schemata. Notice, so you are going to construct different aspects of reading. You are going to interpret data. You are going to retrieve information. Retrieve is recover. Recover information from memory. You are going to organize your goals and sub-goals in reading. You are going to allocate resources, distribute, allocate is similar to say distribute, allocate resources, and you are going to guide the flow of the processing system. You are the owner. In other words, you are the owner of this process of reading. You are an active participant of the reading process. You are not passive. The top-down model acknowledges that what is the important element on this model? The reader's prior knowledge. Remember that. In this theory and in this model, the most important element is the reader's prior knowledge. What the reader already knows about the language, about the world. Now remember that we have these two aspects. Focuses on what readers bring to the process, what they have, what they bring when they are going to read something, they know something, they bring something. And this is the most important here. Readers activate prior knowledge to understand text. So they activate their schemata. They activate the schemata to understand the text. Readers, as I told you, are active processors of meaning because they are going to make hypotheses, confirm or reject hypotheses. They are going to create new hypotheses. So they are active. They are not just reproductors. No, that you reproduce. You read and tell me the meaning. No, no, no. They are going to make more things. They are going to use their prior knowledge and compare it to the information that they are going to read. They are reading, and they are going with this comparison. They are going to create hypotheses, reject hypotheses, confirm hypotheses. So the role of the reader is active, is not passive. And notice here something important. Reading proceeds from whole to part, to general to specific. On the other side, we have from a specific to general. Now, this is from general to specific. Now we are going to make a contrast between these two theories, all right? The traditional view of reading, bottom-up, and the cognitive view of reading, top-down. Remember, we have the theories and we have models. No? The theory is the traditional theory, and the other is the cognitive theory. Related to these theories, we have some models. The models of readings are bottom-up model and top-down model. Remember, traditional reading is a passive activity. Cognitive reading is a dynamic activity. In the bottom-up model, readers have no control over the act of comprehending a text. They're just, if you could say in some way, translators. No, you're going to identify the words, get the meaning, and that's it, and reproduce it. No more. They are not going to make hypotheses, no inferences. They are not going to create anything. Just transmit what you read, and then you reproduce it. They don't have no control over the act of comprehending a text. On the other side, in the top-down model, readers make use of their previous knowledge to comprehend the text. They are not just reproductors. They are going to use their own information related to the word or to the language to comprehend a text. So they have control, and notice, they have control of this process of reading. In the bottom-up model, readers rely only on the formal features of a language in the quest for making sense of a text. Here, the formal features of a language, because they are going to identify words, letters, spelling, grammar rules. That's it. The formal features of language. And with these formal features of language, they're going to reproduce and make a sense of a text. But on the top-down model, readers as well as tests are at the heart of the reading process. So the reader here in this model is an active participant of the process of reading. It's not a passive one. So they have in the same category of importance with the text, or maybe more, right? That's why here says are at the heart of the reading process. Notice here this contrast between these two theories, and at the same way, two models of the reading process. Now, let's pass to the third view, or third theory of reading, the metacognitive view. Metacognition, as I told you, involves thinking about what one is doing while reading. So you are going to analyze, what are you doing while you are reading? Klein et al., 1991, stated that strategic readers attempt the following while reading. Notice this word, very important, strategic. So before reading something, they are going to think how to read. They not just read, I'm going to read, let's start reading. But they don't know how to read it. That's why here says the word strategic. So they are going to use some strategies, some techniques in order to read well and understand better. So what are they going to do? Notice. Identifying the purpose of the reading before reading. What is the purpose? What is the intention? Why I'm going to read that? Identifying the form or type of the text before reading. Oh, what type of test is this? Formal, informal, a letter, a memo. What kind of test? Notice they start analyzing. They identify first the purpose of reading, then the form or type of the test. They think about the general character and features of the form or type of the test. For instance, they try to locate a topic sentence and follow supporting details toward a conclusion. So they are going to think about some characters, general character and features, some characteristics, not features, similar to say characteristics, some characteristics of the form or type of the test. That's why here you have an example. They try to locate a topic sentence. I don't know if you have heard this term before, a topic sentence. What is a topic sentence? Can you tell me? Have you heard it before? A topic sentence. This is very common when we read something.
It's a sentence that resumes the subject of the paragraph.
Exactly, yes. A topic sentence is a sentence which has the main idea or the general idea of a paragraph. Sometimes you can find it also in a text. No? In the first paragraph, you have some sentence that gives you a general idea or the main idea of the text that you're going to read. And then you have some topic sentences inside each paragraph. And you can have, again, a general idea or a main idea of the paragraph that you are reading. No, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs. Depends on the type of text you are reading. So notice, you are analyzing. With this topic sentence, notice, with this topic sentence, you find or you are trying to look for some supporting details because you have the topic sentence and then you have some details. And with that, you go to a conclusion. You get to a conclusion. Yeah, Lucy, yes, the thing, no, the topic of the text that you're reading, all right? So, notice what you are going to do in the metacognitive view. You know, yeah, read, and that's it. Oh, yeah, you're going to do some activities, yeah, that's it. But why am I reading that? What type of text am I reading? What are some characteristics of this type of test? So this is what you do when you apply the metacognitive view of reading, and you become, that's what I told you, you become an strategic reader. Because you are going to plan, no? It's like you're creating a plan. What strategies, what things are you gonna do when you're going to read something? So that's why here we call this the metacognitive view. Notice here, these three views or theories of reading. Projecting, this is another thing that you do in a metacognitive, projecting the author's purpose for writing the text while reading it. So you identify, recognize what is the purpose of the author to write this text. Choosing, scanning, or reading in detail. So you are going to analyze and see what strategies to use. Scan, read in detail, no? Skimming, No? Skimming and scanning, then we're going to talk about more this. Skimming and scanning is to read fast, both. On the other side, we have read in detail. So you are going to find some specific information, details. No? It's a longer process. Scanning and skimming, they are quicker process. Making continuous predictions about what will occur next based on information obtained earlier, prior knowledge, and conclusions obtained within the previous stages. So notice all the things that you're going to do in a metacognitive view of theory. Predict also, you're going to make continuous predictions what will happen next. All right? Based on the information that you obtained earlier or prior knowledge you have and conclusions that you obtained within previous stages. Now, I want to show you this table related to these two models that we have seen, and also we are going to add another model. All right? Don't get confused. First, we have seen three theories: traditional, cognitive, metacognitive. Traditional, we have the bottom-up. The cognitive, we have the top-down. No? And here you have a third model. This third model is a combination of the previous two. Let's see. Let's see here. A little of history. The bottom-up model appears in the 1960s until 1970s. The top-down model appears from the 1970s to 1980s. And this interactive model, late 1980s until now, the present. So we use, most of teachers use this interactive model. Remember, the bottom-up model is a decoding process, just decodification, focus on the test. Remember, it is focused on the test because the most important purpose of reading is to decodify, no more. The top-down model, reading is a psycholinguistic guessing game, remember. You're going to guess, make predictions, hypotheses, get to conclusions, and create new ones. And it's focused on the reader. Remember, it's focused on the reader. In the interactive model, it's a process of constructing meaning from tests through the use of both bottom-up and top-down processes, strategies, and skills. And it's focused on the interaction. So you're going to use both. You use some strategies or skill related to the bottom-up, and then you use some strategies and skills related to the top-down process. So you're going to use both. You construct the meaning from the test using both models. In the bottom-up, it's focused more in the alphabet letters, sounds, words and grammar rules, sentences, so discourse rules, paragraphs, and longer discourse. Notice that it's focused more on the test, on the formal features of the language. All right? It is focused more on the formal features of the language. You decodify. In order to decodify, you need to know the, to identify the letters and the spelling patterns and the grammar structures and so on, because you're just going to decodify it and reproduce it. But in the top-down model, first, the reader receives input from the test, makes predictions, tests and confirms or revises those predictions. Notice, receives input from the test. And with this input from the test, the reader is going to make predictions, test and confirms or revise those predictions. And the second one is that the reader uses a holistic approach to reading and writing that advocates the use of children's literature and authentic reading materials. So the secondary literacy. Notice, this is the secondary literacy. That's why here says a holistic approach to reading and writing. Notice. And what are they going to use? Authentic reading materials. In the interactive model, we are going to use first both bottom-up and top-down processes occur simultaneously for the reader to comprehend the meaning of the test. Two levels of interaction. Notice we're going to have two levels of interaction. The interaction between the reading and the test, and the interaction between two kinds of cognitive skills, identification and interpretation. Remember, the bottom-up is identification, and the top-down is interpretation. So you're going to make these two kind of cognitive skills interact each other, identify and interpret. And they occur simultaneously. Remember, simultaneously. Both processes occur simultaneously. What is the approach that you're going to use in each model? In the first model, you're going to use the phonics approach to teaching reading. What is the phonics? Do you have any idea what the phonic means? Phonics. Anybody? Anybody? Have you heard this term before? Phonics. No, nobody? Phonics. Phone, remember, when we talk about phonetics and phonology, we talked about phones. Phones are? Sounds, yeah. Phonics, remember, phonics is when you make a relationship between the sounds and letters. All right? For example, you use this a lot with children, no? Little kids, kindergarten, you use this phonics approach when you teach the language. Sometimes we don't use it a lot, no? Sometimes you use this, a connection between the sounds and the letters. That's why here says, no, alphabet letters, sounds, words, grammar rules. So you're going to identify the spelling patterns, identify the words, the meaning of words, and then the sentences and phrases. That's why here says that we use the phonics approach to teach reading. Notice, to teach reading, the phonics approach. In the top-down model, we're going to use this. The whole language approach is used. What does it mean, whole language? What is that? Can you tell me? Do you have an idea? Whole language.
Complete language?
Yeah, all right. Okay. That's it. Any other idea? Any other idea? Complete language, whole language. At the beginning of this session, I told you a little bit about this term, whole language. For example, when we say that we are going to have a reading lesson to our students, no? Sometimes we prepare, no? Oh yeah, today we are going to make a reading lesson because we're going to focus on reading. But the students are going to do just reading activities. Is it possible to your students can do just reading activities? That's it?
No, they use many aspects. They also need to write something. They need to use the pronunciation. Many aspects. It's not only reading.
Exactly. This is what I told you at the beginning, no? When I told you that we are going to talk about teaching reading, I told you when we say teaching reading, it doesn't mean that we are going to focus just on reading. Could be if you apply the bottom-up model, just reading, no? Just decodify the letters and that's it, get the meaning and that's it. But if you apply the top-down model, so it means that you're not going to have just reading activities or apply just reading skills. It means that you use the whole language, all the skills, as Lucy says. All the skills. It means you're going to do activities of speaking, reading, writing, listening. That's why he says the whole language approach, because you're going to use all the skills in a reading lesson. It doesn't mean that you're going to do activities from speaking most of the time or listening and speaking, listening activities most of the time. No, the focus, remember, is on reading, not to make your student acquire some reading skills or soft skills. No? This is the main purpose of your lesson. But in order to get to this soft skill reading skills or reading soft skills, you're going to use the other skills too. For example, to make hypotheses, the students are going to think and then they can reproduce it orally. So they are going to speak. To make a contrast with the information they have and the information that they are going to receive, they could speak. Maybe you present the test and they are going to listen to the test or listen to some opinions related to the test. So they are practicing the listening skill too. And finally, then you can have to write something, a literary test related to the reading that they have read. Notice that you are using all the skills. This is a reading lesson, yes, but you use all the skills. This is known as the whole language approach. Remember, yeah? This is the whole language approach. You use all the skills in a lesson. And the interactive model uses the balance approach to teach reading. Balance is a combination of both. In some activities, you use some strategies or techniques from the phonics approach, and then you use some strategies or techniques from the whole language approach. That's why here it says balanced, all right? Balanced approach. So you use both. Both approaches are used, using some strategies or techniques from both of them, all right? So notice here, this contrast between these models that we could apply in a teaching when you teach reading, no? First, you have the decodifying process, focusing more on the formal features of the language. You use the phonics approach. In the top-down model, so it's like a guessing game. Your students are going to predict, infer, hypothesis, confirm, reject. It's a holistic approach. Remember, it's a holistic approach, and you could use authentic reading materials. And you are using the whole language approach because you are going to use all the skills related to the language, not just reading. And finally, you have the interactive model, no? That is going to join both models, the bottom-up, top-down, to produce interaction. These two models interact simultaneously, all right? And they produce two kinds of interactions. Interactions between the reading and the text, and two kinds of cognitive skills, identification and interpretation. And you are using a balanced approach. All right? Okay? So, until here, any question? Hasta aquí, ¿alguna duda sobre las teorías y los modelos? Any question? Acuérdense que estamos viendo estos tres modelos. Hemos visto primero tres teorías. Hemos visto la teoría tradicional, la teoría cognitiva y la teoría metacognitiva. La teoría tradicional está relacionada a este modelo, ¿no? El bottom-up. Y la teoría cognitiva está relacionada al otro modelo que es top-down. Y aparece un tercer modelo que va a unir estos dos, tanto el bottom-up como el top-down, se utilizan simultáneamente, ¿no? Y teníamos una tercera teoría, que era la teoría metacognitiva, donde el lector analizaba, ¿no? El proceso de la lectura, el antes, el durante y el después. Se llama metacognitiva. Tenía control del proceso de la lectura, ¿no? De la comprensión lectora. Iba a analizar el propósito, por qué estaba leyendo, qué tipo de texto es el que va a leer, ¿no? ¿Cuál es el propósito del autor? Reconocer ciertas características según el tipo de texto que va a leer, ¿no? Y así iba construyendo el significado. Eso era un lector estratégico, por eso decía esa palabrita, ¿no? Es un lector estratégico que va a planificar o está tomando acciones de análisis de cómo es que va a leer o cómo es que va a llegar a entender un texto. Entonces tenemos estos tres modelos, ¿no? Vuelvo a repetirles. Actualmente se está utilizando el interactivo, ¿no? Donde voy combinando tanto estrategias y técnicas del modelo de bottom-up como del modelo top-down, ¿no? Se van combinando, va a crear una interacción. Por eso era muy importante, al inicio de la sesión, vimos qué significaba leer, ¿no? Varios de ustedes me dijeron un concepto más relacionado al bottom-up, ¿no? Que era entender las palabras, decodificar esas palabras, obtener significado. Creo que uno de ustedes nomás mencionó el conocimiento previo, ¿no? Lo que tenemos como bagaje personal. Cada lector tiene un bagaje personal, o cada estudiante en este caso tiene un bagaje personal. La visión del mundo, ¿no? Ese es el world knowledge, o el conocimiento del idioma que tenga, tanto del primero como del segundo. Iba a ser un contraste entre estos dos, ¿no? Iba a haber un contraste entre estos dos. Y ese conocimiento del mundo y ese conocimiento del idioma se llamaba Schemata, ¿no? Esquemas. Y estaba dividido en tres, ¿no? Eran tres tipos de esquemas: el formal, el de contenido y el lingüístico. Formal es todos los valores, creencias, costumbres que yo tengo sobre el mundo. Contenido es el conocimiento del tema que voy a leer. Y el lingüístico es el conocimiento del lenguaje que yo tengo, tanto el primer lenguaje como el segundo lenguaje. Hemos visto todos estos aspectos de lo que envuelve leer. Miren, es un proceso, como hemos visto al inicio también, es un proceso de pensamiento, ¿eh? No solamente es decodificar. Entonces eso hay que tenerlo bien claro, ¿no? Como docentes Tenemos que tener bien claro en qué consiste cada una de estas habilidades o competencias, como le mencionó Lucy, para poder yo saber cómo enseñarlo. Si yo no conozco en realidad cuál es el proceso, no voy a poder enseñarlo de la mejor manera posible. Y así puedo yo buscar diversas estrategias y técnicas, ¿no? All right. So, any question until here? If not, we can go to the next topic. We have just 15 minutes. All right. Yeah, let's see here. This is the final point in this session. Applying theory and research to practice. As you know, there are a lot of researchers and linguistics and investigators that created theories and some methods or models, no? So according to this research, we have some opinions how to apply this theory and research to the teaching of reading. One of these is second language students need to learn to think in English in order to read effectively in English. This is very important. Sometimes when we give a test to our students, we focus more on the translation, no? That they could understand every word in the test. But this is not the purpose. The purpose is that we need to make our students to think in English. And in that way, they are going to be better readers in English. Huh? Reading instruction needs to be based on training ESL and EFL students in new ways of talking and thinking about tests. They need to talk and think about tests, not just decodify them. All right, ESL English second language and EFL English as a foreign language. No, remember these terms. Huh? English as a second language and English as a foreign language. No, so we need to make our students to talk and think about the test that they are reading. In teaching reading, instructors need to take into account the following conclusions and recommendations of educational researches. Cognitive psychologists claims that students learn new strategies or thinking processes most effectively when they are consciously aware of what they are doing. So this is related to the metacognition. If they know the purpose, if they know that type of test, if they know some characteristics about each type of test, so they are going to be more conscious about this process. And they are going to learn new strategies or thinking process to get a better understanding of the test. They can monitor the comprehension and apply appropriate strategies as needed for comprehending a test. Now, this is related to the previous one because they are going to have control, no? In the metacognitive view, they're going to have control of the process of reading. And in that way, they're going to be able to identify which is the most appropriate strategy to get a better understanding or comprehension of the test. Oh, yeah, this is the same. Yeah. Interacting and talking about tests in particular ways is essential. And others found that students develop literate skills when teachers encourage them to talk about written language. And when students have opportunities to talk to each other about how they make sense of a test. Notice, this is very important. Because sometimes we do some reading activities, but the students work by their own, no? They don't interact. It's very important that they can interact each other. Notice here, not just a student teacher. Oh yeah, please give me your opinion about the reading, or tell me what would be the title of the test according to the pictures. No, because this is a very common activity, no? What we do with the reading test. Yeah, look at a picture and read the title and tell me what would be the topic of the test. But here, you're interacting with the students, but the students are not interacting with each other. Here says that you have to make your students interact each other. They could have opportunities to talk each other about how they make sense of a test. This is very important. So students in that way develop literary skills because you are encouraging them to talk about written language. All right. Research also confirms that students must read faster and with more fluency if they wish to read effectively. Faster reading promotes reading in thought units instead of one word at a time, and that leads to improved comprehension. So notice here, this is very important too. Reading aloud and reading faster. You need to encourage your students to read faster. But it doesn't mean without intonation. No. With the correct intonation, no? But why? What is the reason that you must make your students read faster with more fluency? Because when they read fast, you are encouraging that they are going to read in groups. They are not going to read word by word. As here says, they are going to read in thought units. All right. For example, when we talk about phonology, we call this, instead of thought units, we call this speech units. They're going to read phrases, sentences, or clauses, no word by word. All right. And in that way, they are going to improve their comprehension. So you need to encourage this to your students. Practice this. No, reading fast. But as I told you before, it doesn't mean that they are going to read like robots. No, with no intonation. No. With the correct intonation, but more fluent. And it's gonna help them to read in groups. If you want to say in simple terms, read in groups, no one by one. Because most of the students read word by word, no? Research also confirms that, no? So they are reading word by word. But if you say, no, try to connect words, don't separate them. Now, research also confirmed that students must read faster. You have this is a thought unit. Remember, this is a thought unit. Research also confirms that students must read faster. And then you have another thought unit or speech unit. In phonology, you call this a speech unit. With more fluency if they wish to read effectively. Yeah, it's a connected way to read. And in that way, they can understand better, because if they focus just word by word, they don't have the idea, the general idea, the whole meaning. No, they lost the whole meaning because they just identifying words. Research also confirms that. No, it's not good. It's not good for them. All right. And finally, this is the final point that we're going to talk. Krashen, this is another famous linguist. Krashen posits that the best way to improve reading is by reading. This is it makes me remember one of my students asked, "Teacher, how can I improve my speaking? Because I want to speak, but I can't. No, it's impossible for me to speak." And I told him, "You want to speak? You must speak. If you don't speak in English, so you're never gonna speak in English. If you're constantly speaking in Spanish, it's not good." Something similar happens here. What does it mean reading? By reading. The best way to improve reading is by reading. There are many ways of reading, no? Academic reading or reading for pleasure. So the most important here, according to Krashen, is extensive reading. What is the meaning of extensive reading? In general terms, is read for pleasure. Not just because the teacher told you to read. No, to read whatever you want. The benefits of extensive reading, this is the meaning of extensive reading. The benefits of extensive reading include fluency, vocabulary acquisition, awareness of grammar, models of writing, and an immersion in the culture of the second or foreign language. Notice all the benefits that you could find when you make extensive reading. Then in the next sessions, we're going to talk about more about extensive reading, because it's extensive and intensive. For example, what you do in class with your students is intensive reading. But when you tell your students to read a novel, maybe a novel they want, or they have read it before in Spanish and they could read it in English, so this is called extensive, because it's not an academic reading. The intensive reading is academic. No, in the books, maybe you have used some books and you have some readings created. They are not authentic. No, created parts of tests, literary tests. So this is intensive because you are going to do some activities with your students to analyze the language, to understand the message, to recognize some type of tests. This is intensive reading. The extensive is not that. It's to read whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want. This is the extensive, and this is the most important thing to do when you want to acquire a language. All right? Okay. So, we're going to stop here. Ya nos vamos a quedar aquí. Les iba a mencionar algo. Me informa el coordinador. Vamos a hablar un poquito en nuestro idioma nativo para que nos podamos entender bien y tengamos bien.
Teacher,
Sí, dime, Abraham.
I have a question.
Yeah, tell me.
Teacher, some scholars, or like you suggest, students, they have to learn about the meaning, not by word. Yes, they have to learn by group of words. That's true.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
Chunks.
necessary to translate the words, huh?
Yeah, yes. I got it. Yeah, chunks. For example, in the diagram that I show you, talks about chunks. There's a group of words, chunks. Yes, you're right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Before going out. Ya, les estaba mencionando rápido nada más, porque ya el tiempo nos gana. Ustedes, me indica el coordinador que ya ustedes tienen el acceso a la plataforma, ¿no? Que es Q10, ¿no me equivoco? Ahí en la semana cuarta del módulo de syntax que acabamos en la semana pasada, he dejado un cuestionario para que ustedes lo puedan hacer. Es más que todo como un feedback. Van a tener la posibilidad de realizarlo 2 veces. ¿Ya? El propósito no es tanto de evaluar qué tanto, ni tener una nota y que me va a jalar o no me va a jalar. Más que todo es para una retroalimentación, ¿no? Por eso que les he puesto para que lo realicen 2 veces, para que vayan confirmando algunos conceptos que hemos visto sobre sintaxis. ¿Ya? Entonces no se olviden, por favor, eso le quería mencionar. Si alguno tuviera inconveniente, por favor, coordinar con la persona encargada para que pueda realizar ese cuestionario. ¿Me confirman si ustedes ya tienen todos el acceso a la plataforma? Sí, a ver, confírmenme.
Sí, teacher.
Perfecto, entonces esa es la manera en que vamos a ir también desarrollando los módulos. Cada final de módulo van a desarrollar un cuestionario, ¿ya? Para que, vuelvo a repetirle, más que todo con un fin de retroalimentación, para ir confirmando, reafirmando algunos conceptos que estamos viendo aquí en cada módulo, ¿ok? Well, that's all for today. Next class, we're going to continue talking about reading skills, yeah? And then we're going to analyze in the next 2 other sessions, we're going to analyze my throat. It's tired, my throat. I was teaching from 6 p.m. So here you have this, and the other 2 sessions, we're going to analyze learn some strategies or techniques to apply in a teaching lesson. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you again. See you next class. Take care a lot. Please take care a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye, teacher.
Bye,
Thanks.
teacher. Bye, teacher.
Bye, teacher. Thanks.
Thank you, teacher. See you next class.